With infinite banking, the place to get started is right where you are. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's episode, we're going to be addressing how to get started with infinite banking. I feel like I obviously more or less address this issue with each episode that I do, so it's been both encouraging and somewhat disconcerting to get questions from folks that personally know me and that ask, how do I get started? So again, I'm happy for every one of those messages or emails or phone calls, comments on the channel, all these different areas that I receive this input from folks who are obviously looking into this idea of becoming your own banker, that are vetting this concept of the infinite banking concept as described in R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And they're reaching out to figure out how to get started. So the encouraging part is that there are folks asking about the rubber meeting the road, writing a check that will begin their bank, their privatized bank as they understand it, is not what Zig Ziglar would talk about when he would discuss folks getting cooked in the squat. Now, if you don't know that reference, you're really missing out. And I would encourage you to look up Zig Ziglar and getting cooked in the squat and that whole backstory, because he talks about these folks who have plans to, well, do this when the kids get out of school, or do this when, it's not summertime and you're taking family vacations, or let's do this when X, Y, or Z. And they end up getting cooked in the squat. And again, that backstory on biscuits and, that story from his childhood, it's a lot of fun. Go check it out for sure. Many of you, I have no doubt, are going to know what it is that I'm talking about. I had a mentor years ago who first said to me, procrastination is the assassin of opportunity. So again, with these individuals that I've recently been speaking with, even just this past week, I know that they're not, looking to procrastinate on this idea of infinite banking, and they really want to know, it's like tactically, practically, literally, how do I get started? So I want to be able to address some things. Firstly, with everything that I do on this platform of video and podcast is educational. I'm not making any recommendations. I'm not giving any advice. What I'm doing is my best to promote the idea that you can become your own banker, that you begin this journey to even consider that. And I believe that when most folks hear the phrase, become your own banker, they want to do that, become your own banker, just in the phrase, not ever having read the book or seen a presentation or had a discussion or anything. The phrase and the idea behind becoming your own banker, that appeals to everyone. Now, there's some things that we've got to go through. Nash even says that to consider this idea of becoming your own banker, it is an exercise. And what he said it was an exercise in is, first and foremost, and most importantly, he said this, imagination. Imagination is the biggest obstacle, or the lack of imagination, right? So that's the obstacle. That's where we have to exercise our imagination to consider that we could become our own bankers, that banking is a function, that it just is, that it exists, and that someone controls that aspect in our lives, for our households, for our businesses, for our investing, whatever it is that we're doing. The banking function just is. Someone controls that. And of course, he is the one who had this revelation of becoming your own banker and codifying it in his book, Becoming Your Own Banker. Now I'm the beneficiary today of that thinking and that writing and that implementation and everything that he did to get us along this grassroots movement of folks sharing with folks the idea that you can become your own banker. And that's why education is at the forefront of everything that we're doing here on this channel. And I encourage every prospective client to begin there. Now, the folks that have been reaching out to me, they've obviously been listening to the channel. I know some have even already read the books. And of course, the more you know, the more you're propelled along this avenue of becoming your own banker. And you do certainly get to the point where I need to talk to somebody. And that's exactly what it is. So when you get beyond knowing that you want to become your own banker, and you're reading Nelson's book. I mean, he's the creator of the idea that is the place to start with, the man, where you can read, the book. And he did write his second book, Building Your Warehouse of Wealth. Fantastic book, fantastic. And he even makes lots of recommended reading. He is obviously a well-learned man, and he makes lots of book recommendations. I'm certain that I've not read all of the books that Nash has recommended yet, and I feel like I'm a pretty prolific reader. But you can certainly read his books. You can listen to his very own presentation, his seminar that he would give. It's recorded. You can get it at his website because he's since graduated, but we have access to his materials, thankfully, and you can get access to his seminar and these books on his website, www.infinitebanking.org. And of course, I would obviously recommend that you can learn as much as you can, and should learn as much as you can from the YouTube channel and the podcast here. But certainly, I got to the point in my trajectory after seeing a presentation, after reading Nelson's first book, and after having an opportunity to be exposed to those materials, I wanted to talk to a person, somebody. And that gave me an opportunity to have a question and answer back and forth, to be able to have a discussion about where we currently were financially, what our goals were, my wife and I at the time. And she and I got to take a look at, this is what we want to do. And then we planned ahead, of course. And of course, now over the course of the past several years, we've added, my wife and I, to our system of policies. But to get started, that phone call and having that direct one-on-one conversation where I could get my questions answered and where I could reap from the benefits of somebody who is years ahead in their learning and application experience of this concept was so very beneficial, so very beneficial. I mean, there were questions that were asked I would not have thought to have asked. I mean, and that's where ultimately we get to where we need a professional. We need someone who has already been there and done that. Someone who's still fighting the arrival syndrome, doesn't know it all, but they're well on their way, of course, to doing what it is that they're speaking to us about. They practice what they preach. I've definitely, in many other locations, and I don't mind saying it again, talked about, this is not going to your box store agent and trying to educate them about what this banking idea is that you've heard about and read about to get them on board and prepared to be able to service you, to be able to help you. You need to be able to show up to someone who has been implementing this idea themselves personally. I was actually looking through Nelson's second book earlier today, Building Your Warehouse of Wealth, and the dedication of that book is simply to all those individuals that are out there implementing the infinite banking concept in their own personal lives. And that was just so encouraging for me to be able to read. I did not have the opportunity to meet Nelson Nash before his graduation. I did start implementing the idea of becoming my own banker. I owned policies before that happened, and I greatly regret that I was not more cognizant of who he was and where he was, and make an effort to go personally meet him and thank him and attend a seminar live myself. But I do have the benefit, and so do you, person that's trying to figure out how to get started, to read those same books that I have. And of course, my wife and I now, we've had 7 years experience in owning policies, using policies for the privatized banking purpose in our lives. We've implemented IBC now for 7 years with multiple policies from multiple companies. We've probably made every mistake that could have been made so far, and maybe we're not done making mistakes, but we're students. We are learning. I'm constantly honing my knowledge and my skills. Like I said, I'm constantly working my way through more and more of, the things that Nash had obviously read himself and that had affected his thinking to where he got to that genesis point of becoming his own banker and then teaching his clients how to do that and friends and family members how to do that. That's gotten to Jesse Durham in North Carolina now, which is just really incredible to think about for sure. Now, ultimately, when I address, because I like to do it a particular way, a lot of the time it seems that when Nash was asked a question, that he would return an answer to that individual that had asked him with his own question. And he would say, well, it's biblical. And you could see that in scripture, and that's kind of funny, but it's also so very true. And I correlate that with the idea that I've picked up from James Nethery, which is that when you know the concepts and you understand them, the details don't matter. And when you don't understand the concepts, the details don't matter. So here's a dichotomy here, perhaps, right? Because I said, well, start with education. Learn as much as you can. Absolutely. And that's the truth. That is the place to start. I mean, because it's all conversation until someone writes a check. That's another James Nethery quote. I got to give honor where honor is due. It's all conversation until someone writes a check. What I'm saying is that this dichotomy of me saying, well, go out, learn as much as you can, to be sure, educate yourself, read the materials, have a phone call, watch a presentation, listen to Nash's seminar, all these different things. Also, there's this point to where when you know what is going on, you'll know what to do. So when I got my first policy, my wife and I, we didn't know everything. And yet we were writing a check for what was us a very significant portion of our income at that time, very significant for us. And it was simply because we knew we wanted to become our own banker. This isn't something that's accomplished overnight. Nash would talk about, readdressing our need for finance for ourselves is going to be a lifelong pursuit. You're not going to accomplish everything that you want to do with one policy. So over the course of your lifetime, he would say it's the most profitable thing that you could do to choose to become your own banker, to build up a system of policies. Okay, so that's the dichotomy. I'm trying to be very clear about this. That's the dichotomy is, yes, you should educate yourself, and that's the place to start. But also, once you know that you want to become your banker, just like several years ago when my wife and I knew that we wanted to become our own banker, we started. And that does play into what many of us know for sure. I've said before that, watching someone ride a bike is one thing. Getting on that seat and grabbing those handlebars yourself for the first time and taking off down a hill for the first time. I mean, if you could remember some of those feelings, some of those thoughts from a time such as that, you've seen it done. You know it can be done. Maybe you even got motivated by watching someone else do something on a bike, and you're going to go for it yourself. But perhaps there's some procrastination there. Perhaps there's some hesitancy, some uncertainty. But ultimately, there's nothing like riding that bike for yourself and feeling that exhilaration of momentum for the first time. Again, so that's the experience. More is going to be caught than taught, is what I'm saying there with that bike analogy. More is going to be caught than taught. Nash would say, when you are paying premiums and you are leveraging your cash flows for the things that you're going to do anyway in life, and you're in that position of becoming your own banker, you're going to catch on to so much more than can be taught. So for as much effort as I put into putting out my best practices and promoting the idea that you can become your own banker, that still is just conversation until someone writes a check. More is going to be caught than taught. So I've spoken a lot to finally get to the how-tos. Read the materials. Listen to Nash's stuff. There are some other great materials. Carlos Lara and Robert Murphy have written a book with Nash called How Privatized Banking Really Works. Amazing book, eye-opening book. I'd highly recommend that one. And then Nash has his own recommendations in his books, of course. But ultimately, it boils down to what a good friend of mine said to me some years ago. He said, Jesse, the hardest thing about this, and this could be anything, we were talking about a particular business at that time. The hardest thing about this is you have to say hi to another human being. Now, talk about putting things in perspective. The hardest thing is just to say hello. That's it. Make a phone call. Send an email. If you have questions, I try and check everything, of course, vigorously. Put something in the comments on the videos, send an email, but ultimately, I don't have a cookie cutter approach. Well, if you're asking about my process, Jesse, well, how do I get started? I don't have a cookie cutter approach to how you get started. I'm here to be your biggest fan, your biggest cheerleader, to speed up your learning curve for sure, and to help write a policy and service you through underwriting and obtaining a policy, owning one of these contracts for yourself in a very specific and particular way that meets your needs both now and into the future. So what does that look like in getting started? Well, ultimately, between me and you and a loved one, a spouse, it's certainly best if both are on board. Husband and wife, for example, I was turned on to the idea of becoming your own banker first. Naturally, I had to share that with my wife because we absolutely want to be on the same page together with each other. And personally, I would not choose to write a policy for, a household where one person is absolutely about the idea and the other is vehemently opposed to the idea. I'm not trying to get in the middle of that. But again, when you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. And the folks that are listening to this, I don't really worry about, you trying to educate yourselves. You're obviously here for that very purpose. But having the spouse on board, of course, is very vital. But ultimately, you're certainly going to address things such as, well, what kind of coverage do we need? We're talking about properly structured whole life insurance with a mutual company that pays a dividend. So everybody should be adequately protected, adequately covered for sure. Now, what Nash says and what the impetus behind the idea of becoming your own banker is that, well, if you account for your need of finance, you'll ultimately end up with more death benefit than you can shake a stick at. There's your good Southern expression. If you're listening from some other states, like I know folks listen to, let me know down in the comment section. Do you guys say that? Have you ever heard that? More than you can shake a stick at? That's funny. But if you do, if you account for your need of finance, you'll ultimately end up with more death benefit than you otherwise originally could have been underwritten for with a properly structured policy with a mutual company that pays a dividend. Properly structured. And again, that's why we're talking about, meeting and talking and getting to know and working with your professional. So, and our contact info is 828-817-4223. Email durhamtalents@gmail.com. Shameless. Hey, speaking of saying this, there's another one. Have you heard this one? Dance with the one you came with. Okay. I'll say that. But no, really, everybody's going to find their match. I wholeheartedly believe that every individual should be able to find the professional in anything. I don't care if we're talking about, I really enjoy barbell training, for example, and there are lots of folks who coach barbell training out there. I acclimate towards certain individuals, and that's fine. That's fine for everybody. That's best for everybody. But you need to have a conversation with your professional that can help you understand, well, okay, what kind of coverage do we need? What kind of protection do we need? What kinds of things are we doing or wanting to do? And what kind of premium then does that mean? You should arrive at, what you believe is an appropriate number for you. I'm not going to tell you what your number should be. Now, if you tell me about these goals and when we have a conversation about your particular financial situation and what things are looking like moving into the future, sure, I can have some good ideas about what it's going to take for you to be able to accomplish the things that you're talking about, so that we can get a policy properly structured for that purpose. But not only should a policy be structured for what you want to do this year, the very same year that you get started, and soon, but also over the course of your lifetime. So a policy should be properly structured for your present needs now, but also into the future. So talking about the amount of the premium that you should be paying, what you think is an appropriate amount of premium for you to pay, what mode you would like to pay that, whether because of your cash flows it works best for you to do something monthly, something annually, something semi-annually, something quarterly perhaps. Being able to decide what mode of premium you would choose for yourself. And if it's a first policy, I would also say that while I commonly say that when discussing premiums, if your eyebrows don't get raised a little bit by ambitious thinking, then we're probably not even talking about serious numbers. Okay. But again, I said in the start that Nash said that this idea of becoming your banker, it's an exercise in imagination. Sure. So that's the ambitious part, where if we're not raising eyebrows, if perhaps our wives aren't questioning, or husbands aren't questioning our intelligence or our sanity, then perhaps we're not even talking about serious numbers. But also, these should be reasonable and logical numbers when considering how to construct a policy for what it is that we're doing and want to do. So it's a balance between reasonable, logical, but also something that's ambitious and imaginative. So for that first policy, you would err, and some folks I even have to rein in and say, well, okay, we don't accomplish everything with one policy over the course of our lifetime. Nash talked about a system of policies, so perhaps we need to rein things in. But also the other can happen as well, where we need to expand our thinking. We can't be afraid to capitalize, for sure. That's one of Nash's core principles. Don't be afraid to capitalize. Who owns this system? And when you remember that, well, everything else takes care of itself. So ultimately, in addressing how do I get started with infinite banking, I hope that this has been helpful. I know that when I decided that I was going to become my own banker, that I didn't need anybody to encourage me along my path. I felt so very driven, so very compelled to learn as much as I could and to get started as soon as I could. And that's a common reaction, even as folks will think or say out loud even, oh my goodness, why didn't I know about this 10 years ago? Why didn't I know about this 50 years ago? Whatever the case may be, why didn't I know about this? So when you know that you want to become your own banker, and I hope that this has been helpful, I've addressed this recently in our most recent Q&A episode. Folks were asking me how to get started, and of course people ask me directly how to get started. I just want to be able to put this out there for the benefit of everyone. And even if it's been a while and you've listened to this idea of becoming your own banker, and you've been exposed to the idea of the infinite banking concept, you should know if it is speaking to you or not. You should have gathered by now, and this is going to be self-sorting, whether you're going to continue learning along this line or not. And obviously, if you're listening to this, you're continuing to learn, unless this is your first video ever, in which case, hi. But again, let me point out something I said earlier. It's all conversation until someone writes a check. When you know that you want to become your own banker and you know enough to get started, well, don't look left and don't look right. Just plow your row straight ahead. And if I can be helpful in showing you how to implement the infinite banking concept into your household or your business or your investing, then you could reach us at 828-817-4223, or you can email durhamtalents@gmail.com. This has been a great pleasure for me. I look forward to our next conversation. Have a great day. Take care. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. On your marks, get set, IBC. I've got to quit saying Now, where was I going with that? Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. Hello and, come on, Let's do this. Hello and welcome. No, what's going to be the tagline? Good grief. With infinite banking. What am I doing with my hands? She'll be riding 6 white horse when she comes. That's enough of that.